And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first ever episode of the Z Movie Podcast. And we are the Z Movie Boys. I am Yoko, and this is Michael.
I am Michael. Hello, Yoko. How are you doing?
Yeah, this is good. I mean, this has been kind of a bucket list thing for the both of us, sort of having our own podcast, right?
I don't know about that, but here we are.
Yep, here we are.
Um,
Just to briefly summarize, like what you guys are listening to. This is a podcast about media. It's not specifically about film, but we are both filmmakers. So I think we wanted to bring our unique perspective onto film and jump into our thoughts on different things, whether it be film, TV, music, books, whatever we want to talk about, and we'll ramble on, and you guys will hopefully enjoy what we're talking about. Michael, do you want to talk about what a Z movie is for the folks who don't know?
sure. Yeah, you've probably heard of a B movie, which is like a lower budget, not so well known studio made film. The schlock movies of the '80s are kind of a big example of B movies. There's some gems there, but there's a lot of uh, so bad it's good kind of stuff. Z movies are end of the alphabet, low micro low budget movies made by first time directors and filmmakers, which is kind of where the area that we exist in. We have no budgets really to speak of. We work
Yep.
with friends and volunteers, and we're getting better each time we do it, and hopefully we'll get to move up to like a Y movie or
Oh,
a
why?
W movie or something.
Yeah, hopefully.
But that's sort of our perspective on big budget stuff and classic cinema. We look at it from the perspective of having made films, the torturous experience of making films, our own aspirations and tastes, and then our experiences as well. So that's what Z Movie means. That's why it's the Z Movie Podcast, and we have a lot to talk about today. I think we're starting off talking about director's cuts, and we're couching that in the context of the Snyder Cut, which is sort of the big news on streaming this week/month.
Yes, it is. It's going to be a big event. Whether you like his work or not, I think it's kind of like a big moment in cinema history where we're able to see this troubled production come to life. And just to briefly summarize the history of the Snyder Cut for those who don't know, basically what happened was after the release of Batman v Superman, Zack Snyder was under a lot of pressure to make Justice League be more light and friendly after a lot of people said BVS was too dark. But unfortunately, Zack Snyder had to leave production due to a family tragedy, and Joss Whedon stepped into the film and kind of recreated an entirely different film. And Snyder actually estimated that only 25% of his footage made it into the final cut of the theatrical version. And that movie didn't do so well critically and commercially, to put it kindly. And years later, here we are. There was a huge movement behind it. I was heavily kind of involved in that movement. I am a huge fan of Snyder. I know, Michael, you are more indifferent on the Snyder Cut being released.
Yeah, you're a Snyder stan. I really don't care.
Yeah, Stan. Yeah,
To,
yeah.
to be honest with you, like I don't care. It is interesting. I mean, I don't care in the sense that I wasn't emotionally invested in the whole narrative around him kind of being pushed out and wronged, because there certainly was, he had to leave for personal reasons, but I got the sense from some of the stuff that I saw online that some of the execs at Warner were not unhappy with the fact that he was stepping away from the film.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you'd heard similar stuff, but that, after
That's actually
BVS,
exactly right.
that they were kind of, I think looking to Marvel and seeing how they were kind of doing funner, lighter, quippier stuff. And they relished the opportunity to kind of push him out and bring in Joss Whedon, who, famously did two of the Avengers movies and is much more like, whimsical isn't like the right word for it, but he does like that sort of cutty, light,
quirky,
pop
quippy,
culture-y, yeah, quippy stuff. Like, interestingly enough, the Batman vs Superman didn't have a great critical reception. It made, I think, pretty good money, but the people that liked it really did like it, and the people who didn't like it, I don't think, they didn't like it, but I don't think they put down any kind of like flags over it. Whereas the Snyder fans, the BVS fans, and now the Snyder Cut fans feel like maybe while it didn't appeal to everybody, it appealed to them. I don't terribly care. BVS, I was sort of like, neutral on, and I watched like the first 40 minutes of the official release, Justice League, which is the one that Whedon came in to finish. And I think it was like the scene where Steppenwolf is like doing God of War like animation attacks on the Amazons, that I was like, oh
Oh
fuck,
yeah,
I'm done.
yeah.
Like that, I don't need to see the rest of this. But now it's coming out on streaming. It's coming out on HBO Max, and it's a good opportunity to talk about director's cuts, because I think director's cuts are sort of mythologized in Hollywood.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
And some of the more famous ones, I mean, one of the most famous ones is the Blade Runner cut. I don't know if we want to jump into that first.
Yeah, let's jump into it. I mean, this one is kind of a behemoth on its own because this not only has one cut but several different cuts, and also depending on where you are in the world, they have like different versions. Like there's like a work print in Europe. There's obviously the horrible theatrical cut that came out years ago, and there was like a director's cut, and then now finally a final cut that you guys can actually watch on HBO Max. But
Mhm.
the history of this is actually it's kind of insane how many versions of this fucking movie there are.
It is nuts too that like Ridley Scott at the time was like, he still is. He's obviously a titan now, but he was a very hot
Yeah.
director back then. Coming off Alien, The Duelists, and I think I don't know if he had a movie between the Alien and
I don't
Blade Runner,
believe so.
but he was kind of like prestige genre director,
Yeah.
and the studio still didn't have any faith in what they saw, what he cut together. Like, this won't sell, people won't get this, it's too dark, it's too confusing,
Hmm.
it doesn't have general appeal. And they cut out a decent part of the ending, and they wanted to have voiceover narration throughout the entire thing to kind of hold the audience's hand through
Yeah.
the world and like what was going on and all that stuff. And
They don't advertise for killers in a newspaper. That was my profession.
there,
So terrible.
there's the famous story, I don't know if it's true, but I really hope it is, of Harrison Ford and Ridley Scott. They didn't get along on set at all during Blade Runner, at least from what I've
Yeah.
heard. But they did agree that the narration was a terrible, terrible idea. So when Harrison Ford came into the booth to record his audio, he just like tanked it.
Yeah.
He did it with no energy. So he'd be going, it's like, Los Angeles, 2019. Replicants or it's like he sounds like he's on like NyQuil. Like he just downed a bottle of it, and he's like, "Oh, I got to do a recording for this, or if you can use this." And they put it
But
in.
what's so crazy though is even with that terrible narration and like so basically spoilers for those who haven't seen Blade Runner, but if you're listening to this, I feel like you have.
Go watch it.
Please go. It's a classic. It's amazing. It's just awe inspiring.
There are
But
a couple scenes in that movie, now as an adult looking back, being like, "Oh, that's really
yeah,
uncomfortable."
and also like 21st century. It's like ooh,
Yeah, yikes.
it's not
Maybe
great.
could we not?
Yes, but still a great film. But basically, at the ending heavily implies that Deckard Harrison Ford's character is a replicant and not a
Right,
human.
because he's
And
had these dreams about a particular visual homage that kind of plays through, and then it plays at the end
yeah,
to indicate
exactly.
that he may not be human.
So him and Rachel go on the run, and it kind of ends on like a
Ambiguous note.
exactly.
You don't get any closure on it, which is like it's a neo noir, like cyber
Yeah.
noir, whatever you want, cyberpunk noir.
And yet they used B-roll from The Shining and edited it together to make a happy ending where Deckard and Rachel like drive off into the sunset and and he like reflects on like the whole journey. I'm like, the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
But even that version, that terrible version, even that one was met, of course, with kind of like heavy criticism, but that movie became iconic even with that terrible version. So like I guess enough of the original flavor that Ridley was going for kind of propelled it forward amongst all the other like terrible things that the studio did to it.
Yes,
But
and I do want to say, like, director's cuts, they have kind of become myth, because it is sort of the quest slash struggle or resistance of the director against the studios. That's usually how it's presented, where the director is the creative visionary who has the perfect film in his head,
yeah,
and if he can just get it to the audience, or he or she can just get it to the audience, it will be understood and received and be high art. But then the studio gets their hands on it, because they're sort of the middlemen to distribute it and all that, and they see it and they don't understand it, or they don't think it'll sell, or whatever the case may be, and they decide that they want to cut scenes
Right.
out or reshoot scenes, or in the case of Blade Runner, like add the narration. And so I do think it has taken on this like Robin Hood-esque vibe,
Yes.
like especially if it's a well-known director like Ridley Scott. He's a known quantity, whereas the studio people who were cutting it up, they're faceless essentially to the American and global public. So there's the face of it on one side that represents like creativity and whatever, and then there's the hollow men corporate people. And we're going to get into some examples where it's not necessarily like just pure director genius and studio interference, but I think that is the common like perception of it.
Hey everyone, if you guys want to listen to the rest of the podcast, you can head over to Apple Podcast at the link in the description below and hear the rest of our ramblings. And Michael, do you have any thoughts on our little plug there?
Great plug. Excellent plug. Even better episode of the podcast on Apple Podcasts. Check it out and keep an eye out for more stuff hitting this channel.
And subscribe. Thank you guys.